Serbian is the princess of the Earl Empire, located in the northern part of the continent. Some unbelievable events have happened to her. According to what transpired, Serbian died before she reached adulthood. However, somehow, she returned to when she was 5 years old. Serbian still retained the memories of that day. People around her continually cursed her, telling her to go die. They did not hesitate to throw garbage at her. More precisely, Serbian was being executed at that time. The crowd continued to insult the princess, calling her a wretched child, telling her to die quickly. She does not deserve anything good, they shouted. Another voice exclaimed that she was mad, daring to use evil magic. The emperor, Serbian's father, pronounced that the princess would be punished according to royal law. He declared that Serbian would be executed. Silently, Serbian cried out, "Mother, I did nothing wrong." Why? Gradually, Serbian's consciousness began to fade. She could hear her father's voice. At that moment, she really wanted to know what her father was thinking. Serbian didn't know if she would be safe. When Serbian opened her eyes again, she had returned to her state at the age of 5. Initially, she thought she was trapped in a dream. However, Serbian noticed that she was indeed in her bedroom. This was not a dream. A dream could not be so vivid. Sarah, her maid, seeing that the princess had awakened, came in to ask what she would like for breakfast. To Serbian's astonishment, next to Sarah appeared a blue status panel displaying her current thoughts. Serbian saw that Sarah was cursing, wondering why the princess had woken up so early, calling it annoying. She hated children and had more work to do because of this. Serbian was shocked by the contents of the notification panel. Sarah was the only one in the palace who was gentle with the princess, yet the princess could not believe she harbored such thoughts. The breakfast prepared for Serbian included pepper and hard bread, completely unsuitable for a 5-year-old. After breakfast, the princess was informed that the emperor would visit soon. Serbian did not know how to face her indifferent father who had ordered her own execution. Waiting for Emperor Adoran to arrive, Serbian was shocked to see happiness in her father's status panel. Pleased to meet his daughter, Serbian exclaimed in disbelief. What? She couldn't trust her eyes and continued to read her father's thoughts. The weather today was cold, but Adoran was delighted to see his daughter. She also learned that her father was angry with the Duke for delaying his schedule. The status panel also showed that he had ordered an investigation into the Duke's taxes. Adoran felt he was too lenient for sparing the man's life. Serbian wondered, what is happening? Adoran looked at his daughter and asked, aren't you going outside today? While Serbian stared at her father, unsure of what to do, he was overjoyed. He knew she had been watching him for a while. His darling had grown up. Serbian was still lost in her thoughts. She couldn't believe the reality her father just claimed to remember her. She still remembered how coldly he had executed his own daughter in her past life. Adoran looked at his daughter for a moment longer before leaving, marking a boundary. Serbian was puzzled. Was he really concerned about her? She hoped the status window accurately represented her father's feelings. A person beside Adoran smiled and said, today, His Majesty is fortunate because the princess did not run away. In a panic, Serbian stepped forward and grabbed the emperor's robe, shocking everyone around. Even so, Adoran's current status was very happy. Serbian felt fortunate that he seemed okay with her doing so. Serbian thought perhaps the status window was an illusion, but if it were real, if it truly could reveal her father's thoughts, why did she have to face that in her past life? Serbian wanted to know why she had died and whether she could change the future. Serbian heard her name from her father, telling herself to stay calm. Although she wanted to say a lot to her father, all Serbian could utter was bread. Adoran immediately became angry and asked if the princess was not enjoying her meals. Why else would my darling request bread at this hour? Someone beside the emperor suggested that perhaps the princess wanted to have dinner with him. Hearing this, Adoran was delighted and went to arrange the schedule. When Prince Adoran left, Ellie came to prepare clothes for the princess. Ellie warned that if the princess continued like this, the prince would get angry. Serbian vividly remembered that in her past life, Ellie was a strict person who instilled fear in her. But now, Ellie's status showed regret for the princess. Serbian noticed that Ellie's touch was softer than Sarah's, perhaps her concerns were genuine. Ellie constantly reminded the princess to sit up straight during meals and not to make any mistakes. Serbian agreed with her. Finally, she understood that Sarah was kind to the princess but quite rude, while Ellie was strict but genuinely worried about her. Serbian told herself to try again, hoping not to be as disliked as before. The first step to a happy ending was getting through dinner tonight. Serbian told herself that no matter how many meals she had attended before, she must perform well this time. Sarah urged the princess to hurry up, as the prince was also waiting at dinner. Serbian thought of her brother Damien. Unlike her, a child born out of wedlock, he was the son of the current queen, and notably he was always cold and indifferent towards her. Serbian also learned that the queen would not be attending tonight's meal, which would lessen the pressure if she were there. She wondered if everything would go well today. After being directed by Aderin to her seat, the three of them fell into silence. It was a quiet dinner just like in her previous life. Serbian was puzzled as her father's favorite status seemed to be increasing constantly. Looking at her cold brother across the table, she was surprised to learn that he wanted to start a conversation. Serbian wondered what kind of bizarre situation was happening. Caught up in her thoughts, Serbian didn't touch the food on her plate. Aderin, concerned, asked if the food was not to her liking. It wasn't that. Serbian actually found the dish on the table very appetizing, but what could she do? She would be scolded if she ate too much. Remembering the scolding for wasting food in her past life made her even less inclined to leave it. Seeing her father's concern, Serbian could only say that it was very delicious. Although the emperor encouraged her to eat more, Serbian remained worried. The queen had said she needed to control her weight. The queen also told the princess that someone without magical abilities like her must instead possess a beautiful appearance. As Serbian was still worried, Aderin casually cut up all the food on her plate for her. Serbian felt fortunate to be able to read others' thoughts. Previously, she was always anxious about the tense atmosphere, but today seemed to pass very smoothly. Serbian also noticed her brother watching her intently and complimenting her on being cute. She thought to herself how different this was from his cold demeanor in her previous life. Because the food was so delicious, Serbian couldn't help but eat a lot. When she returned to her room, Sarah asked if the princess had eaten 2 pieces of steak, right? She added that His Majesty seemed very angry because the princess ate without knowing when to stop. Serbian thought to herself, "Don't tell me this is a test." In her past life, the queen occasionally had someone check on Serbian, obviously because the royal family wanted to make things difficult for her. Unsure of what to do, Serbian thought she should have refused instead of eating it. Suddenly, Sarah said that because the princess had eaten too much today, she would have to fast tomorrow. Watching Sarah turn away, Serbian called her back, claiming she was sick. To her surprise, Sarah was extremely annoyed. She said she would be right outside the door if the princess needed anything. Serbian went to bed thinking she didn't want to be a despicable child anymore. Even if she could use her powers, she still had to stay put. Serbian cried, uncertain if she could change the future. The next morning was different than usual. Normally, Sarah would wake the princess, but today she did not. Serbian wondered if Sarah was angry because she was sick and didn't wake her up. Serbian found a bell next to her bed and rang it. She needed to get up and change quickly, or people would think she was a useless princess. Ellie, following the sound of the bell, entered and urged the princess not to sleep any longer. Surprised that it wasn't Sarah who entered, Serbian asked. Ellie simply said that His Majesty would explain later. Serbian was anxious, wondering if her father was coming to scold her for last night's incident. At that moment, another maid kneeling by the bed spoke up, admitting she had committed a deadly sin. 2 more people followed, begging for the princess's forgiveness. Serbian was confused and didn't understand what was happening. Clearly, the 3 maids were begging for her forgiveness, yet their thoughts were filled with curses. Ellie told the 3 girls to stop. The princess needed to take her medicine now. Serbian could see that Ellie was deeply regretful about letting the princess fall ill. Ellie was internally scolding the others, wondering what on earth they were doing. Because of her age synchronization, Serbian looked at Ellie and couldn't stop crying. Aderin stormed in angrily asking what they were doing. He was sure they had heard the confinement order. Even though his daughter was sick, they were still causing a commotion here. He ordered the soldiers to detain these maids immediately. The emperor was furious that the maids were more concerned about escaping blame than taking care of the princess. Then, looking anxiously at Serbian, who must be feeling lonely being ill and alone, seeing the princess crying continuously, Aderin reassured his daughter not to worry, he would assign other maids to her. Serbian didn't understand what was happening, but she knew she had to prevent Ellie from being taken away. Serbian wanted to explain to her father that Ellie always cared for her. But as an adult trapped in a child's body, due to improper age synchronization, Serbian couldn't express her thoughts properly. She could only run to Ellie and hug her. Fortunately, Adoran understood his daughter's intentions and Ellie became the princess's personal maid. Ellie was astonished, feeling she wasn't qualified enough. Adoran simply stated that his word was final. Then, turning back to look at his daughter, he was surprised to see how adorable she was even while crying. Of course, Serbian could see all these thoughts. The princess was overjoyed that her father heeded her wish not to take Ellie away. From the beginning, his presence was to punish the maids who mistreated the princess, making her extremely happy. Serbian felt oddly elated. Although the maids faced trouble, she was very happy. Although she knew her father didn't dislike her, Serbian was still extremely tense facing Adoran. She thought she had to do even better. Although her father had been worried about her because she was sick last time, who knew what might happen if she made mistakes again? Serbian worried that her father might dislike her as in her previous life. A table full of food was prepared, and Adoran asked his daughter why she wasn't eating. Looking at the pastries on the table, Serbian's eyes lit up. They surely looked as delicious as if they would melt in her mouth. Serbian negotiated with herself that she could eat just one. Adoran observed his daughter, sensing she was more well-behaved than usual. Sarah never allowed the princess to snack. Serbian remembered that the first time she had sweets was at a party when she was 14, but afterwards Sarah controlled her diet strictly. Seeing his daughter still not eating, Adoran said that if she didn't eat, he would ask the chef to prepare something else. Serbian suddenly asked if her father would tell others about her eating habits. The emperor smiled, feeling his daughter was too adorable. It seemed the little girl was shy about eating in front of strangers. Adoran told her to just eat, promising he wouldn't tell anyone. Serbian reminded herself to eat just one, but unwittingly ate a large amount of cake because it was so delicious. While she was still panicking about having eaten too much, the emperor brought more cake. He casually cooled the cake because he heard his daughter liked cold desserts. Adoran reminded his daughter, who was engrossed in looking, to eat before it melted. Seeing the girl start to eat, he asked if it suited her taste. The princess replied that she liked it very much and would want to eat it every day. After dismissing Sarah, the princess had chosen Ellie as her maid. Ellie appeared tough but smiled more often. Serbian did not hesitate to let Ellie know how much she enjoyed seeing her smile. Ellie promised to make the princess look beautiful, although she had never done this job before. Today, Serbian was dressed by Ellie before meeting the queen. Even though she was very familiar with this place in her past life, stepping into the queen's residence still made Serbian very tense. Shavel, the kindest person who had held the princess's hand in her previous life, was always ready to listen to what she said. Serbian was incredibly excited to see her again. Once more, thanks to the status panel, the princess saw that the queen's favor towards her was negative. The queen even felt annoyed by this little girl. Despite finding Serbian irritating and unpleasant, the queen still gently invited the girl to sit beside her. Shavel complimented the princess, saying she looked beautiful today. Serbian thanked the queen, inwardly noting that her face and voice still resembled the queen from before. The queen inquired about the recent unpleasant incident at the princess's mansion. Despite still cursing inside, Serbian wondered why there was such a discrepancy. Shavel admitted that it was Sarah's fault, the child she had raised, and was shocked she could do such a thing. She hoped for the princess's forgiveness, admitting her failure to manage the maid. Serbian was terrified to see the queen's intention to execute Sarah. Was the queen she had trusted in the past really like this? Shavel smoothly shifted the conversation to ask if the princess had met with His Majesty the day before. Serbian softly said she went to his garden. She paused, then said she felt very scared. In truth, she wasn't that scared, but actually felt extremely happy. However, it wouldn't be right to reveal this in front of the queen. Shavel reassured her that it was normal to fear the emperor since he is the leader of the kingdom. If she couldn't meet with him, she could come to her. Serbian verbally thanked her but inside felt terrified and wanted to leave quickly. Before Serbian could leave, the prince arrived. The queen asked her son what wind had brought him here. This was Serbian's second encounter with her brother. She wondered whether to start a conversation when she saw Damian's cold expression. Serbian was also tactfully dismissed by Xiavel. The princess thought her brother still had the same cold face as in the previous life. At dinner, she thought things would be different, but she was wrong. How could a brother, seen as a genius, care about a useless child? Later, feeling down, Ellie prepared her favorite sweets. Serbian looked at the cake and pleaded with herself to forget Sarah's past warnings. Ultimately, she couldn't do it, only managing to apologize to Ellie and refuse the cake. Serbian burst into tears, once again overwhelmed by memories of the past. Seeing the princess crying, Ellie came over, hugged her, and said she didn't need to feel guilty. Children need to eat a lot, and from now on, she should eat whatever she wants, especially food from His Majesty. Serbian joyfully asked Ellie, "Really?" Through this experience, Serbian's body synchronization increased by 3%. Over the next few days, she enjoyed her meals freely within her mansion. She began to feel bored and approached Ellie to ask if she could go outside. She added that if Ellie was busy, another time would be fine. Ellie replied that of course the princess could go out whenever she wanted. It was her mansion after all, and she had the right to do whatever she wished. Ellie asked if until now, Serbian had thought she couldn't leave the mansion. Ellie was heartbroken to admit it was her fault for not mentioning it sooner. Despite her comfortable life now, Serbian could not forget the food waste incident from her past life. Once, a carriage passing through the slum area overturned, and a bag tore open revealing high-quality food inside. People were shocked, and a rumor quickly spread, saying that the unused food was being thrown away from the princess's palace. And this wasn't the first time it had happened. They had seen it many times before. In her past life, Serbian didn't remember her childhood clearly, but one memory was vivid. Adarin, with an icy stare, asked his daughter if the food was not to her taste. She couldn't describe how scared she was at that moment, but Serbian chose to tell the truth, that the food was not good. This was because Sarah always served her unappealing and cold dishes. She would never forget the look of disappointment on her father's face when she spoke those words. The bad rumors of the past life. Being young, the princess always thought it was her fault. She completely assumed it was her responsibility and her fault. But the truth was, it wasn't the princess's fault. While strolling with Ellie, Serbian remembered this old story and wanted to pass by the kitchen to take a look. Ellie smiled and asked if the princess was hungry. Serbian looked at Ellie, wondering why she was panicking. She began to read Ellie's worried thoughts. Ellie was concerned that the princess would be devastated if she saw it. Why wasn't there a budget for replacements? What met Serbian's eyes was an empty kitchen, devoid of anyone. Ellie stepped forward, saying the servants had already completed their tasks for the morning. Serbian was puzzled as it was time to prepare dinner, yet there was no one in the kitchen. Everything was neatly arranged, but there were no ingredients in sight. Such a place could not possibly be associated with food waste. After all, why did everyone say that the wasted food came from the princess's kitchen? Seeing Serbian standing in the kitchen, Ellie thought she might be hungry and brought some snacks. Watching the princess eat obediently, Ellie felt relieved that she was willing to eat. She also hoped her brother would recover quickly and be as lively as before. From this thought, Serbian remembered that Ellie's brother was suffering from malaria. Ellie's sick brother and the food waste incident, Serbian believed she could change that. Serbian stepped into a mysterious doorway, a place that seemed like paradise. She saw a boy with platinum hair and silver eyes. This person was the king of the magic tower, Carmen. From her past life's memories, although he was just a commoner, his talent had nominated him to become the master of the tower, making him the first to achieve that. Serbian didn't know if there was a reason behind it, but Carmen was always very special. However, he looked down on Serbian. Even in the final moments, he was the one who decided to execute the princess. Carmen looked at Serbian, the little girl who had just trespassed into his territory, and asked who she was. The princess sensed that his mood was very good. Was she hallucinating, meeting someone who looked like an angel? Serbian whispered to herself, how could this be? Isn't he angry? When he heard the princess's name was Serbian, he even found the name too cute. Suddenly, Carmen laid his cloak on the ground and invited Serbian to sit. She was puzzled why he would ask her to sit on his cloak. Moreover, magicians always regard their cloaks as a symbol of honor. Serbian thought that since Carmen's affection for her was increasing, following his request probably wouldn't be a problem. Serbian sat on the cloak, thinking if anyone knew where the tower she was seeking might be, it would definitely be Carmen. Maybe Carmen didn't hate her yet, so she could ask clearly. Serbian looked at Carmen, and he immediately asked, "What's the matter? Do you want to come here again?" If so, he would grant her the privilege to enter his territory. At that moment, Serbian could still sense Carmen's joyful thoughts about her returning. Carmen approached and asked her what kind of magic she practiced, or if she was just a noble. She didn't quite look like a magician. After their conversation, Serbian decided to go about her own business. Carmen followed her, insisting that a little girl shouldn't be wandering alone in the woods. The princess retorted, "Are you also alone?" She wondered if the person before her was really the Carmen she knew from her past life. Thinking about it, his name was slightly different, Carmen Castillo. She remembered clearly that in her previous life, he didn't have a last name because he was a commoner. Dismissing this, Carmen asked why she was venturing into the woods so late at night. If she was looking for something, just say the word, and he would definitely help. Hearing this, the princess described a small yellow flower named Cassia. Carmen thought for a moment. He seemed to have found it once in the garden. To keep Serbian safe, he personally went to look for it. To the princess, this moment felt like a dream compared to her previous life. The thoughts and actions of those around her were really different from what she knew, only describable as deeply affectionate and sweet. With Carmen's help, Serbian was able to find the flower. He personally pulled it out and handed it to her. Carmen thought Serbian's small hands shouldn't touch the soil. Curiously, he asked why she took the whole root, planning to plant it. The princess honestly replied it was for making medicine. Carmen was surprised. Cassia as medicine? As far as he knew, it wasn't very effective. Carmen was concerned if it was safe for the little girl to consume it. Serbian could see all of Carmen's thoughts. She guessed he was worried about a child wanting to eat it without thinking. Carmen was truly a good person, loved by most. Regarding Cassia, while people knew it reduced fever, it actually had other effects. Serbian still remembered the day Ellie cried bitterly, wishing she had known sooner to save her brother. She would never forget that day. Cassia had minimal effect on adults but was key for treating children's fever. Serbian was determined, even though she couldn't save Ellie's brother in her past life, this time she definitely would. On their way back, Carmen informed Serbian that she possessed a significant source of magical energy. This meant she had a high potential for harmonizing with energy. Serbian asked in excitement, "Really?" Although she was of royal blood, her magic was virtually non-existent. She didn't know why, but she always admired those with magical abilities. Carmen laughed heartily and replied, "Why would I lie about that?" Serbian had thought that such power would be beyond her reach forever. She encouraged herself to be braver. Now was not the time to wait for permission. The princess decided she would focus on enabling what was allowed. Currently, she had found the medicinal plant, but the waste issue remained unresolved. Serbian suddenly asked Carmen how royal waste was handled. She simply thought he might know. Carmen wasn't sure, suggesting it was probably separated and disposed of immediately, especially near the south gate of the slum area where he used to live. Carmen worried that revealing he had lived in the slums might change her opinion of him. To his surprise, she happily praised him as wonderful, understanding everything. As it was nearing the guards' patrol time, they decided to quickly leave the woods. Serbian asked Carmen to keep today's events a secret. Carmen set a condition that if she promised to learn magic in the future, he would keep the secret. Thinking that was the only way they could meet again, Serbian, who was fascinated by magic, immediately agreed. Thus, the promise between the two children was made. Serbian thought Carmen would become even more skilled in the future. It was wonderful that he wanted to meet her more often. The princess decided whatever happens, doubting he would still want to meet her in the future. But the Castillo castle was familiar. She had seen it somewhere before. Upon returning to the mansion, Serbian found Ellie waiting outside the door for her. Ellie frantically asked where the princess had been all night. She hurriedly checked if the princess was injured anywhere. It was rare for Ellie to be angry, scolding the princess for not telling her before leaving, especially at night. Serbian was at a loss, realizing that Ellie was really angry. She thought she should have told her before leaving. Serbian bowed and apologized to Ellie. Ellie realized she had been too harsh and needed to be gentler. She had let her emotions overwhelm her, causing the princess to be frightened. The princess pulled out a bunch of flowers she had picked earlier and offered them to Ellie, saying she wanted to give them to her. Ellie was truly touched, realizing the princess had gone out to pick flowers for her. Ellie patiently explained that the princess could leave any time but must promise to inform her beforehand. Ellie added that she was very happy to receive the flowers from the princess. Serbian replied that they were medicinal for Ellie's sick brother. They were medicine for his fever. Ellie assured the princess not to worry, as she would definitely give them to her brother. After that day, Ellie happily reported back to the princess that her brother was fine now. Thankfully, it was all due to the princess's medicine. With that matter resolved, Serbian quickly addressed the issue of food waste. She thought it necessary to find the source before it spread further. There were too many people at the south gate, and the princess didn't want to draw attention to herself. At the same time, His Majesty was also approaching the south gate. Hex, close to His Majesty, commented that it had been a long time since someone had invited him for a walk, but he didn't expect it to be this far. He laughed loudly, asking if His Highness had heard that the princess was coming here. Adoran scolded Hex for being too noisy. He asked if there was a problem. Hex, wiping sweat from his forehead, laughed and said no, nothing at all. He admitted he just wanted to keep His Majesty updated. Serbian was surprised to see her father here as well. Adoran chuckled, pleased with the report that he could meet his daughter here. Hex took the opportunity to laugh loudly, saying what a coincidence it was. He explained that since His Majesty had been very busy recently, he had come here today for a stroll to relax. Adoran added that it was indeed just a coincidence. He observed the princess, thinking she looked lovely today, although her clothes seemed a bit worn. Serbian blamed herself for meeting her father in such attire. She didn't have many beautiful clothes, as most had been worn several times, but if she had known she would meet her father, she would have worn her cleanest outfit. When Ellie mentioned that the princess was shy around strangers, Adoran wondered if the girl was afraid to see him. Serbian silently answered that she wasn't scared, but didn't know what to say. Ultimately, His Highness decided to keep his distance to make his daughter feel more comfortable. Serbian feared that if this continued, her father would turn away and leave just like in her previous life. Gathering all her courage, the princess tugged at Adoran's robe, pleading for him to stay. For a moment, it seemed she saw her father smile, though it disappeared almost instantly. After that, Adoran truly stayed and even prepared a multitude of delicious cakes for his daughter. Standing by, Ellie wondered if she could take the leftover macarons after they were eaten. Just carefully preserving them would make a nice snack for the princess. Watching Ellie's concern, Serbian wondered if she should ask for some to take with her. Suddenly, His Highness asked why the princess was walking in such places. Serbian thought she couldn't reveal the truth to her father. Adoran continued, asking if it was her first time here. If so, he would take his daughter to look around. Serbian was happy, feeling that exploring with her father was much better than being alone. The place the princess currently wanted to go was the storage area near the south gate. Luckily, she knew where it was. The emperor informed his daughter that this was a low-level bureaucratic hub, where the lower-ranking officials of the departments worked. Hex, following behind, inwardly exclaimed, "No. How could His Majesty say such complicated things to a little princess?" Just as Hex thought, Serbian understood little of it, because in her previous life she had learned nothing about this subject. Seizing the moment the emperor paused, Hex interjected to remind that the princess hadn't yet begun her formal education. Serbian glanced towards the carriage she needed to find and called everyone over there. Fortunately for the princess, she saw the food bags. She had arrived before the incident occurred. Adoran had someone open the bag, and even he was astonished by the amount of food inside. The stable hand was terrified upon seeing Adoran there. Serbian immediately noticed that he was afraid of being discovered. Hex spoke up, noting to His Majesty that if one looked closely, it seemed odd. The contents of the bag were intact, which couldn't possibly be leftover food. Moreover, leftover food wouldn't be stored in a carriage. Isn't there a designated disposal area? He guessed it seemed like someone had stolen the food from the palace. The emperor spoke up, suggesting that interrogating the servant would clarify everything. The servant screamed, begging for mercy, claiming he knew nothing about the matter. Serbian, frightened, hid behind her father. Adoran quickly comforted her, lifting her into his arms and assuring her there was nothing to fear. He then ordered a thorough interrogation of the servant to determine the origin of the food. Adoran suggested that his daughter should also head home. The princess regretfully felt that was all she could do for now. Nonetheless, since her father had already suspected the leftover food issue, she believed something different from before would emerge. Shortly after, the investigation yielded results. They found a flag belonging to the princess while interrogating the stable hand hidden at his residence. Adoran was incredulous and asked what this meant. An investigator quietly reported that the princess had wasted too much food and even discarded it. Without saying much, His Highness immediately went to the princess's residence to investigate further. Serbian was happily enjoying the leftover macarons Ellie had given her from the previous day. The princess also felt very good knowing Ellie's brother had recovered from his illness, and she had prevented the food waste issue she had long worried about. She wondered how the carriage driver had managed to steal so much food. Fortunately, her father was investigating the matter. Suddenly, Adoran appeared, surprising both of them. Serbian could see her father wondering if the food had come from her palace. Frightened, she thought, why is this happening? Could it be like her previous life again? Adoran directly asked his daughter if she had been wasting food recently. His gaze shifted to the plate of half-eaten cakes. The princess worried that if her father discovered the leftover food from the previous day, he would be furious. Ellie kneeled down first, admitting guilt with the thought of protecting the princess at all costs. Seeing the emperor's suspicious gaze, Ellie explained that she was the princess's personal maid. He acknowledged that but continued to ask what grievous fault she had committed. Before Ellie could respond, Serbian burst into tears and confessed. She told her father that she was the one who had brought the food from yesterday here. Adoran, disbelieving, asked again if it was really food from yesterday. Ellie begged His Highness for forgiveness because the princess's palace currently had no budget. He angrily asked what nonsense she was talking about, as he had given clear instructions. Ellie responded that even though it was the princess's palace, she was the only maid there. Serbian realized this was not good. Even Ellie could be in danger. She couldn't afford to lose Ellie and needed to do something. Just then, someone from the kitchen came out and reported that indeed, there was no food in the princess's palace. Strangely, they couldn't find any other maid either. The king, still confused, asked the soldier what that meant. Was the girl throwing the food away? The soldier hesitated, saying no, the kitchen was so poorly equipped that there were no ingredients to cook with. Ellie added that those words were true. Since she had been appointed the head maid at the princess's palace, she hadn't received any support. But the disposal of food had absolutely nothing to do with the princess. Moreover, the cakes the princess had just eaten were ones she had brought from yesterday. The princess grabbed her father's robe and whispered that she had not discarded any food. These were also the words she had wanted to say in her previous life. Crying so much, Serbian could only sit silently on her father's lap. Fortunately, things turned out well. Ellie brought a cold pack to apply on the princess's eyes. Ellie said she thought she should be stripped of her head maid position for making the princess cry. When the two had calmed down, Adoran demanded that they tell him the whole truth. Ellie, heartbroken, said she had tried to prepare meals, but the current budget was insufficient. Therefore, she had to use her own money and leftover food from other palaces. Serbian thought to herself, how hard had Ellie worked. Adoran, heartbroken, wondered what he had done to this child. In the Earl Empire, the emperor ruled the empire and its people, while the Empress managed the internal affairs of the royal palace. However, if the Empress bore a child, the child's mother would exercise authority while the child was young. But if the child, like Serbian, lost her mother, the Empress would take over. Adoran looked at his daughter and apologized for being such a father. He promised to take direct care of everything concerning the princess from now on. Upon returning, the emperor had an argument with the Empress, who feigned ignorance about the situation. Serbian was also called in, and the Empress demanded she speak up. As soon as Serbian entered the room, she could read the Empress's thoughts. She was furious, wondering how the leftover food was discovered, ruining her perfect plan. Knowing the Empress's facade was a deception, Serbian did not want to interact with her. Seeing Serbian hide behind the emperor made Shavel even angrier. She questioned why the princess was behaving this way towards His Majesty. The emperor spoke up, saying there was no other way. The girl found it very difficult to communicate with others besides him. The princess thought that although she didn't need to cling to her father, it was a temporary measure to avoid the Empress. Following this incident, Adoran decided to revoke the Empress's financial management rights of the palace. Naturally, Shavel disagreed, arguing that the internal management of the royal palace was her right. She reminded the emperor not to forget that this was also stipulated in his oath. Aderin coldly replied that the empress dared to undermine the emperor's oath. He sharply noted that her actions were attempting to show that the empress was above the emperor. Shavel, frightened, said she didn't dare, and it must be a misunderstanding. The emperor continued, saying if it truly was a misunderstanding, then hand over the authority immediately. After resolving everything, he ordered her to leave the palace. Serbian couldn't believe the empress was such a person, something unimaginable in her past life. Before leaving, Shavel cursed under her breath, indeed just like her mother, which was infuriating. The emperor then prepared a table full of delicious food for the princess. He stated that from now on she could eat anything she liked. Serbian was happy knowing that Ellie no longer had to worry about food expenses. Moreover, she was pleased that her father was concerned. Aderin realized that his daughter's recent weight loss was not due to her mood. He blamed himself for not realizing it sooner. Ever since Serbian was born, he had been extremely fearful. It was hard to see her not crying. Concerned about hurting his daughter, he had kept his distance. After returning, the emperor contemplated whether these situations were always due to the fault of the previous maid Sarah, who always instructed not to eat too much, painting the emperor as a frightening figure. To clarify this incident, both Sarah and Ahim, the stable hand, were to be interrogated. However, the emperor soon received the grim news that both had committed suicide. He was certain someone had murdered them and left no evidence. Nevertheless, very few people within the palace had enough influence to kill without trace. The emperor began to suspect someone behind the scenes, suddenly picturing the empress in his mind. A close confidant of the emperor asked if he really suspected her. Aderin couldn't yet conclude and decided to have the matter investigated further. Additionally, he assigned more guards to protect the princess, so at least she could freely enjoy the palace. Initially, the steward under the empress's command was punished. His duty was to manage the budget provided by the empress. Everyone concluded that the two had collaborated to divert the princess's palace budget. Serbian thought the resolution wasn't perfect, but there was no alternative. Since that day, many changes had taken place in the princess's palace. The kitchen became well stocked with a generous budget. Delicious cookies filled the cupboards and there were plenty of healthy ingredients. New servants were also carefully selected. The delayed payment issues were resolved with an increased budget. Thanks to this, Ellie had funds to spend, bringing significant changes to the princess's palace atmosphere. All of the princess's furnishings were replaced. Naturally, the princess was very pleased. The same room that had felt oppressive and stifling in the past now seemed much brighter and airier. The biggest change was the breakfast. When Aderin said he wanted to take personal care of the princess, she thought it meant transferring managerial oversight to her father, but it also meant that every morning the emperor would have breakfast with the princess. At breakfast that day, the emperor also announced an increase in the princess's living expenses. Looking at the dishes on the table, the princess quietly praised her father's magical touch. Serbian picked up her light set of chopsticks, feeling its lightness. Aderin said, "This was made especially for you. The items in the princess's palace will also soon be replaced with similar ones." The emperor then asked the princess if she liked them. Serbian thought about how she had been using large, cumbersome bowls recently and was touched that her father had noticed. This felt like receiving an unexpected gift, bringing her great joy. Aderin also took Serbian to the beautiful royal garden. If it were in her past life, the princess wouldn't believe she could enter, but now it had become a more frequent occurrence. Jane caught the princess as she was about to head to the flower garden and asked if she was planning to go out. The princess promised Jane she would just take a short walk nearby. Serbian felt fortunate because all the new servants were incredibly kind, especially Jane, who was as gentle as she appeared. While the princess was engrossed in the flowers, Prince Damien arrived and greeted his sister, causing her some confusion. Serbian responded to her brother and then planned to slip away. Unexpectedly, her brother started making conversation. At this time, the emperor was exceedingly generous with the princess, while also expanding the investigation into the empress. Previously, Aderin had ended the long war and was compelled to marry the only princess of the empire, Shavel, in what was entirely a marriage of contract. This was because the emperor's heart belonged only to one person, the mother of Princess Serbian. Even now, though the Empress held no affection for the princess, she was still bound by duty to fulfill her responsibilities. If this disaster was caused by the Empress, it would inevitably provoke the Emperor's wrath. Returning to the Emperor's garden, Damien was thankful that the princess had greeted him back. He had behaved poorly at the Empress's palace that day, so he thought Serbian would be angry. Today, he wanted to personally apologize to his sister for his actions. The princess asked her brother why he did that. Damien didn't answer her but asked if he could come to see her. Serbian happily agreed. Fearing that the people at the mansion would worry if she was delayed, she quickly bid her brother farewell and returned. As she left, Serbian could sense her brother's relieved thoughts. Damien believed that everything would be fine when the princess's palace was handed back to their father. In her previous life, the princess remembered her brother as the epitome of a perfect prince. He was so intelligent and magically skilled that he was considered a threat to the emperor. Naturally, he was the heir apparent. The princess knew this better than anyone. But suddenly, one day Serbian was accused of wanting to usurp the empire's throne. To this day, she still didn't understand what had happened that led to her being charged with treason. Serbian thought that even though she had managed to avert a food surplus issue, she still couldn't be at ease now. The princess planned to choose a place far from the royal palace to live after she came of age. The next morning, as soon as she left her bed, Serbian received news that the prince was looking for her. She thought it was odd he would come so quickly. Serbian worried about what her brother wanted. Had she made some mistake the day before? To her surprise, he brought a cold cake. Damien explained he had rushed over to make sure the cake didn't melt. He never stopped saying that this is the gift. He tried to make it really delicious because he heard you like it. Serbian skeptically asked if he really made it himself. Damien replied of course. At the same time, the princess saw the joyful thoughts of her brother when he himself knew magic. Serbian silently laughed. So that's also called making it yourself? Jane, standing nearby, was delighted to see the siblings together, noting the princess liked sweet foods. They looked so pleased, and the crown prince truly resembled a caring big brother. On top of the sweet cake, Damien had also intentionally prepared a few animals for the princess. Jane stepped forward, offering to safely remove the animals from the cake and cut it for the princess to eat. Serbian reminded Jane to do the same for her brother. Hearing the princess call him big brother, Damien felt extremely happy. Reflecting on it, this was a form of address she had never properly used before. In her previous life too, because she was shy, she always referred to her brother as the crown prince. Suddenly, Damien said, "If ever I behave oddly towards you, please be understanding." He said it in advance, worried that Serbian might become frightened and dislike him, similar to their last encounter at the Empress's palace. That familiar cold demeanor from her past life was unforgettable. But Serbian didn't understand why her brother said that. She was just curious about what his current thoughts were when she saw them. Damien wished he could quickly become stronger to protect his sister. During this time, every morning Serbian had breakfast in the palace with her father. Eating well and sleeping in her father's arms had become her daily life. Serbian motivated herself that she couldn't miss breakfast or get insufficient sleep. Today, upon arriving at her father's palace, Serbian found out that her brother was also there for the meal. Damien asked if their father had called him here for a reason. The emperor replied that it had been a long time since the prince had breakfast with him. Serbian felt something was off between the two, but nonetheless, they really did look very much alike. During the meal, the emperor casually asked if his son had recently brought cake to the princess. At the same time, Serbian saw the emperor's regretful thoughts. He had originally planned to do it himself at the earliest time but ended up being a step behind. Damien informed his father that he had made the animal-shaped cake. Eating plain white cake wasn't interesting. Serbian wondered if the two were about to argue. Nonetheless, today's meal proceeded with a certain heaviness, and somehow Serbian ended up finishing it completely. Reflecting on it, not only in appearance but also in personality, her brother greatly resembled their father. She walked through the garden, thinking she also had to prepare bit by bit for the future. After safely leaving the royal palace, Serbian hoped to receive a small house. Planting flowers and farming for the latter half of her life wouldn't be too bad. Serbian thought about how she was not only charged with treason, but also with using magic. Then Sarah suddenly disappeared. The royal guards stormed into the palace, searching and finding objects she had never seen before, all related to dark magic. Now thinking back, the princess wondered if all those things were also done by the Empress. Just reading others' minds wasn't enough to reassure her. Serbian motivated herself to try even harder. Recently, Aderin consistently refused to meet with the Empress. She realized everything was now in complete disarray. Sarah was driven away, and the food surplus was discovered. She even thought it was a clever plan. Shavel didn't know how much the Emperor had found out. She now had no choice but to revise her plans. As Serbian was walking outside, she happened to meet the Emperor. He wanted his daughter to follow him somewhere. Honestly, Serbian felt each day was miraculous. But she was also very anxious that once her formal training began, they would discover she could not restore her magic. She thought they would be disappointed to find out she was a useless princess. Aderin showed his daughter the gift he had prepared, a large animal model. Serbian told herself not to think negatively anymore. This moment was very important to her. Just a little longer, she wanted to enjoy this happiness a bit more. Beside the animal model, Aderin had also prepared a table full of food for his daughter. He proudly stated that compared to cakes, of course, she preferred macarons. The princess honestly replied she liked both the cake and macarons. The emperor promised the princess that next time he would prepare both. Serbian suggested to her father that she wanted to learn magic, but he refused, saying she was still too young. As for the princess wanting to learn magic to take the model anywhere, the emperor allowed her to visit this garden anytime. Serbian's eyes widened in surprise. Her father really allowed her to enter his private forest. The emperor's private garden was known as the most beautiful place in the palace. Naturally, Serbian wanted to come here to admire the flowers every day. Serbian often saw her father working at a table in the flower garden. She didn't want to disturb him, so she intended to leave quietly. But Serbian was spotted by him and called back. The smell of paper and the warm sunlight made her sleepy. Just then, Hex arrived to report a matter to the emperor. He was surprised to see the princess there too. Aderin didn't mind his daughter's presence and instructed Hex to speak. Hex reported that he had just heard news that the kingdom of Garambal needed help. There was a disruption in transporting essential ingredients to Garambal, involving the precious medicine Param. While transporting the medicine to Garambal, the royal courier was attacked. Although the ambusher was captured, all the medicine was destroyed by fire. The reserves of herbs in the Herbaldot Empire were still sufficient, but most of the rare items sent for aid were burned. Serbian was astonished upon hearing this. From what she learned, it was clear that Garambal had been destroyed. In ancient times, there were 4 empires on this continent. However, apart from the Herbaldot Empire in the north, all the other empires had fallen. Many empires bombed to replace the fallen empire. The kingdom of Nabapal dominated the south. The kingdom of Garambal ruled the west coast. About 20 years ago in the recent continental war, Aderin had conquered the entire continent. This was all the historical knowledge Serbian had learned from her previous life. The event that led to the collapse of the kingdom of Garambal was a plague, not a war. Serbian felt fortunate that at this time the kingdom still existed, but perhaps it would soon fall as it had historically. Hex worriedly said that if their side couldn't deliver the herbs on time, it would be difficult to maintain the special imported fertilizer from them. Serbian was still lost in her thoughts. She remembered that the Param herb could cure leprosy in Garambal. The princess wondered if providing enough medicine could prevent the collapse. Besides Serbian, the emperor's command to send the remaining medicine there was spoken. Hex informed the emperor that the stormy season was approaching. Sending medicine during the stormy season would result in significant losses. The scale and cost were expected to increase considerably. Moreover, in the recent decade, the incidence of leprosy in Garambal had decreased, perhaps due to their stockpiling. Serbian recalled her history teacher's words from her past life. It was during a time when the Herbaldot Empire stopped supplying herbs due to the storm season. Suddenly, leprosy spread rapidly, an event no one could have anticipated. The disease spread everywhere, engulfing Garambal. The emperor noticed the princess's grim expression. Serbian was just thinking about how many people would fall ill this season, but perhaps this situation could be remedied. This was an opportunity to prevent the collapse of Garambal. Serbian earnestly asked her father if he did not intend to help those people. Hex, standing beside her, worried that the princess was too young to understand and feared the emperor might become angry. Adaran countered by asking his daughter if she understood how her choice could harm their empire. Serbian, in the innocent tone of a little girl, said that the sick would suffer greatly. "Father, you must keep your promises." Serbian sincerely didn't want to say these words, fearing her father would become angry. But she did not expect that the emperor would actually agree. Serbian was delighted that her father always listened to her childish words. Then why in her past life did her father always refuse to listen to her explanations? The news that the emperor listened to his 5-year-old daughter quickly spread throughout the palace. This unintentionally created a big wave and made the princess uneasy. After the rumor, many people paid more attention to the princess. Serbian feared that the rumors would unfold as they had in her past life. Just in time for the rainy season, the princess decided to stay in her own palace to avoid attention. The Earl Empire was located in the northern part of the mainland. Always enduring cold weather and large snowstorms, people also limited their time outdoors. Serbian was sad because she could no longer dine with her father every day. Serbian was still immersed in her thoughts. Ellie noticed that the princess's mood was off and that she wasn't eating as much as before. Just as Ellie was about to report this to the emperor, Serbian stopped her. The princess asked Ellie not to go anywhere and to stay with her instead, as she didn't want her father to know about such a trivial matter. Unexpectedly, Serbian received a message that the consul wanted to meet her. The princess worried about what could have happened. The consul had urgent news for the princess, apologizing for the sudden appearance. Leprosy had spread widely in Garambal and caused serious damage. Serbian thought to herself that it really happened, and she didn't want things to get worse. History was repeating itself, but what about her own past? Seeing the princess's tense expression, the ambassador assured her not to worry too much. Thanks to her foresight, the paramedicine had been delivered on time. It had been interrupted until the end of the rainy season, but thanks to her, it was sent earlier. The ambassador bowed and told the princess that she had saved Garambal and the neighboring western countries. Serbian couldn't believe she had actually saved people. Just then, a voice from outside announced the emperor's arrival. The ambassador was confused. Hadn't he just told him to quickly inform the princess? And now what was he doing here? As soon as Adaran entered, he picked up the princess and asked if he had heard that she hadn't eaten anything. He had come immediately upon receiving the news, noticing she indeed looked unwell. When Adaran called for a doctor, Serbian stopped him. The princess told her father she was not sick. The emperor immediately asked why she wasn't eating. He turned suspiciously to the messenger, questioning the truth of the information. Serbian, worried for his safety, spoke up that she simply didn't want to eat. The princess hadn't learned about the state of the empire, but she noticed everyone had become busier. The emperor was so busy that she didn't want to bother her father just over a meal. The emperor still held his gaze, asking the princess what was wrong. Adaran tried to reassure him not to worry, and asked her to explain why she wasn't eating. That was when Serbian realized that even her skipping meals made her father worry. She had never thought that she held such an important place in her father's heart. Serbian whispered that she really didn't want to eat alone. Adaran stroked his daughter's face and asked if she didn't want to eat alone. Serbian replied that she wanted to eat with her father, but it didn't need to be every day. As if afraid her father hadn't understood, she added that sometimes would be enough. Serbian wanted to explain clearly to her father, but found herself rambling like a child. She hoped she didn't sound like she was begging. The princess wondered if it was because of a forgotten past that she had to be so cautious with every word. Adaran told his daughter he guessed she was thinking wrong. He quickly turned around and asked an old man if he hadn't heard what he said. He wanted to know the truth why the princess thought she couldn't eat with him. The emperor had intended to eat with his daughter after finishing his work. Why was there such a misunderstanding now? Elia bowed and informed the emperor that the consul said he couldn't join breakfast. That's why the princess misunderstood that the emperor would never come. Adaran couldn't believe these people were playing games. The emperor explained to the princess that he would have breakfast with her after finishing his work, unless he was too busy. But he promised to have breakfast with her after all the busy work was done. Therefore, he needed his daughter to promise that she wouldn't skip meals when she had to eat alone. Serbian joyfully promised her father. She also asked if her brother would join them, right? That matter passed, however, the rumors about the princess still remained. People still paid attention to Serbian when she went outside as before. They came to observe but did not greet her. They behaved impolitely because they thought Serbian was just a child. Serbian thought she should just take a walk for a while and then return. The reason Serbian went outside during this time was because of the whippic flower, a species that only blooms during the storm season. She enjoyed its beauty before it wilted but was always judged by those around her. Thanks to many people paying attention, Serbian practiced her ability to read status tables. Although it was difficult to read many people at once, she could still determine if they were talking about her. Seeing the princess's mood was off, Ellie asked if the princess was scared because there were too many people. Serbian said not really, then suggested they head back together. Inside the emperor's palace, Hex had investigated and found that someone had deliberately spread leprosy. The investigative team also marked the outbreak of the disease. Hex pointed to a map for Adarin to see. As the emperor already knew, the Earl Empire had begun researching leprosy. At the same time, Garambel was supplied with palm trees for treatment. However, the current outbreak is entirely different from before, which is suspicious. The disease had been controlled for many years, but now it has erupted during the storm season, making it very difficult to supply the necessary herbs for this rapidly spreading illness. Garambel is particularly concerned about this situation, as most of their population is infected. Garambel is suffering significant damage compared to other places. Adarin ordered the consul to investigate this matter once more in secret. Serbian learned that the snowstorm would continue for the next month. She thought about how her birthday was approaching. Serbian's birthday falls in the middle of the storm season. She still remembers her 6th birthday from her previous life. That day just passed like any other normal day without any celebration. The reason was that everyone knew about the surplus food incident caused by the princess. Moreover, the empire was in a state of chaos. It was a time when bad things were happening both inside and outside the empire. Thus, the Empress wanted the princess's birthday to pass quietly, so on her 6th birthday, Serbian spent it alone in a large, dim room. She remembered how the snowstorm was relentless, wishing that someone would just remember her birthday. But this time around, her birthday would still be celebrated as per tradition. The surplus food incident and the chaotic situation in the Garambel Empire had been averted. However, Serbian didn't allow herself to have too many expectations. The greater the expectations, the greater the disappointment. The princess wondered if this time she could dine with her father and brother. That alone would be enough for her. Even though the snowstorm had begun, the princess's palace still looked incredibly peaceful. The more peaceful it was, the more Serbian thought. She knew Jane was preparing her birthday gift. The princess felt that being able to see the thoughts of others was good, but the downside was knowing about special gifts in advance. The princess was also surprised that everyone cared about her so much. To avoid dying like last time, Serbian had planned to escape the palace as soon as she came of age. However, now there were too many beautiful memories making her reconsider that decision. Serbian thought to herself that if things could just stay this way forever, it would be wonderful. The princess suddenly thought that although she couldn't use magic, perhaps she could help the empire with other abilities. So, she decided to start studying more diligently from now on. Serbian went to Jane and told her she wanted to go to the library. Jane agreed but reminded the princess that she couldn't read and there wouldn't be much for her to see. Persuaded by the princess, Jane agreed to let her go to the library to play. Jane happily followed behind the excited princess. She guessed that because the palace was too quiet during the snowstorm, the princess wanted to go out to play. Later, Jane realized that the princess knew the way to the library. At the library entrance, Serbian encountered a man that made her eyes widen in fear. Surely this was a sign of dark magic. The wizard Antonio greeted the princess first. He saw this as a precious opportunity. If he could get close to the princess, he might gain access to the emperor. For him, befriending a child was incredibly easy. Serbian, terrified, thought she was being trapped again and that she would be killed. Overwhelmed with fear, the princess fainted shortly thereafter. In her delirium, Serbian kept asking someone she had never met before why he was harming her. Adarin stayed by his daughter's bedside until she woke up. Serbian opened her eyes to see her father sitting next to her, unsure of what had happened. Wasn't she just sitting in a cold prison cell a moment ago? The emperor soothed her, saying the physician had checked and found nothing unusual. He asked if she felt pain anywhere. After a while, Serbian realized she had been given another chance at life, returned to the past. The emperor patiently asked his daughter what that wizard had done to her. He wanted her not to worry and to tell him everything. Serbian was unsure if she should tell her father, given his apparent concern. The princess whispered that she was scared. Scared of being trapped like before, scared of being abandoned. But these words she only dared to say in her heart. Adaran told his daughter to rest first, and then left abruptly as if he had urgent business. Serbian wanted her father to stay longer but couldn't keep him. After leaving the princess's palace, Adaran went straight to the prison. He looked at Antonio and asked his son if he had confessed anything yet. Adaran approached the wizard darkly and demanded to know what he had done to the princess. Damien, worried about his sister, asked his father if she had spoken about what happened. When Damien found out, she fainted out of fear. Even Antonio loudly protested his innocence. He insisted that he had only intended to greet the princess. Antonio wondered why everything had gone so wrong. The truth was that the emperor highly valued the princess, and he just wanted to win her favor. He internally screamed that he hadn't done anything yet. The princess suddenly fainting had thrown everything into chaos. Damien asked if the physician said it was just psychological shock. He then guessed it must be because Antonio's face was too frightful. The princess had quite high standards. Antonio couldn't believe what he was hearing and inwardly prayed for salvation. The physician could only try to prescribe restorative medicine for the princess. The emperor, very annoyed, scolded for administering medicine without knowing the cause. The physician, scared, said he just wanted to improve the princess's condition. Based on the princess's preferences, the physician had prepared medicine for her to take. Everyone around urged the princess to drink it quickly. The physician inwardly begged her to drink it fast, or he'd be doomed. Serbian picked up the medicine cup. Although she hated taking medicine, it seemed there was no other way. The princess also noticed a high-quality fabric from the palace was being used to line the medicine bowl. Adaran told his daughter he had instructed them to make it less bitter, so she should feel comfortable drinking it. Serbian thought if her father said it was okay, how could she not drink it? Moreover, she read the thoughts of everyone in the room, all of whom were worried about her. Serbian drank half the bowl, finding it too bitter, and left it on the table. The emperor, concerned, asked if she couldn't drink it. Was everything all right? The physician's soul nearly left his body, fearing the end of his life. It was quite unfair for the physician because if he focused on making the medicine taste good, it wouldn't be able to perform its intended effect. Serbian worried that if she didn't drink it, the old man would be in big trouble, as there is no such thing as delicious medicine in the world. Serbian made an effort to drink the entire bowl of medicine pleasantly. Thus, the bizarre incident safely concluded in the princess's palace. However, Adaran did not let this matter slide. He secretly ordered an investigation into the wizard Antonio. Hex was the one who directly investigated and uncovered numerous scandals associated with him. Damien, after reviewing the documents, found the man to be dreadful and could only ask his father what should be done. Wizard Antonio had exploited his position in the tower, deceiving and kidnapping children from the slums to turn them into witches. Kidnapping such children to enslave them was an unforgivable act. He claimed he was happy to train those children to become witches. Hex continued to report that only after the storm season could they definitively know, as most of the children had been sold to other countries. Since there was no slavery system in the Earl Empire, but it still existed across the continent, the emperor ordered to track this to the end to save the children. He remembered something and looked into Hex's eyes, asking if he wasn't a member of the Magic Tower. Why didn't he know about such activities by a subordinate wizard? Someone nearby replied that although they knew he made money from nobles, they were completely unaware of the kidnappings. Adaran found this suspicious and once again ordered a detailed investigation to see if anyone else connected to the tower was involved. At the princess's palace, Serbian couldn't sleep. Clearly, everyone was very worried about her, but the princess feared when they might change. Serbian was still haunted by her previous life's abandonment. The emperor had promised that she would never have to encounter Antonio again, but nothing was certain that everything would proceed smoothly. Serbian looked at the night sky, wondering how to ensure her survival. Initially, the princess thought about having money. Serbian went and gathered all the gems she had, placing them in the doll she always carried with her. Serbian thought that if she had to escape, It would be easy to carry the gems with her. She didn't want to go anywhere. It would be wonderful if the past did not repeat itself. If she could live as she was now, it would be marvelous. Once the budget issue, which was once a significant problem, had been resolved, Ellie began renovating the entire princess's palace, which had become outdated. Serbian was dazzled by a furniture catalog. It was beautiful. Ellie suggested keeping the blue furniture because it matched the princess's eyes. Serbian agreed that she would choose blue. Reflecting on it, she realized she had no blue furniture in her previous life after the only decorated gem cabinet was completely destroyed. Ellie pointed to the book, saying there were many options so the princess could choose freely. Serbian thought that buying so much would be seen as extravagant. The princess said she didn't need much furniture, just a few pieces would be sufficient. Serbian wished she could express herself more clearly. Ellie reassured her that this amount was not considered much. Just then, Adarin arrived and asked his daughter why she wasn't in the garden today. He was worried that she was still scared of the wizard, so he promised that the wizard would never appear before her again. Serbian knew her father's words were true. Antonio had committed a terrible crime and had been severely punished. She was also surprised to hear about the things he had done. The emperor picked up the furniture catalog to look through. Ellie reported that the princess was considering redecorating the palace, but was hesitant because of concerns about her finances. The emperor was surprised. Why should the princess worry about money? He said her worries were unnecessary. There was no need to choose. They could decorate each room differently, living in a different room each day. Serbian naturally refused, as that would be too wasteful. Adarin resolved the matter by using his own money to pay. Moreover, he came today to talk about the princess's birthday party. Before he arrived, he had decided with the ministers to organize a grand birthday party for her. Therefore, he needed a suitable schedule and budget. Hannibal, the head of the Parkour ducal family, spoke up. It was disrespectful, but Hannibal thought it was an inappropriate time. This was related to the situation in Garambal. At this time, with leprosy occurring on the west coast, as an empire, Hannibal thought it would still be prudent to be more cautious. Hannibal continued to ask why they couldn't simply make the prince's birthday party even simpler. The emperor angrily responded that the duke's words were not quite right. Garambal was no longer dangerous now. According to the latest news, the leprosy had completely weakened. The report also mentioned that the oldest king of Garambal had recovered. Adarin rebuked that even with the storm, this news had already been known outside. He questioned Duke Hannibal's audacity to speak without knowing this fact. He emphasized again who had saved the kingdom of Garambal from the epidemic. Hannibal was not ready to give up, mentioning that baseless rumors were spreading in the royal palace. He was anxious and worried that his hard work would be swayed by a young princess. Without letting him continue, Adarin admitted the truth that indeed the princess had changed his heart. Hannibal feared, thinking that the emperor might plan to share power with the princess. Adarin, uninterested in Hannibal anymore, spoke for everyone to hear. Initially, he had planned to postpone assistance to Garambal. However, Serbian's deep loyalty had changed his heart, and it was precisely because of this that Garambal was saved from crisis. Therefore, it was correct that the princess's actions in saving the kingdom of Garambal were respected. Adarin announced to everyone that he would organize a party to announce the princess's birthday. Hex followed the emperor after the session ended, asking if this was all right. Hex worried that today's rumors would further ignite. At Prince Damien's palace, he was also not idle, busy finding a most special gift for his sister. Damien had always wanted to be closer to Serbian, but because their mother was displeased, he could not approach. Thus, the prince had to put on a mask like his father, forced to observe Serbian from a distance. The coldest day of the storm season was Serbian's birthday. Ellie got up early to prepare the princess to be the most beautiful for the party. The emperor himself came to greet the princess. Seeing his daughter in her beautiful attire, he thought she was becoming more like her mother Abasi every day. He silently spoke to his wife Abasi that their daughter had grown up. He promised to take good care of the princess. According to Ellie, the princess's birthday would be celebrated according to the royal tradition over 3 days. Serbian recalled that in her previous life, she had never had a traditional birthday. Ellie handed the princess over to the emperor. From now on, the princess would accompany her father. At the party, Serbian hid fearfully behind the emperor. Such a large-scale party was extremely stressful for her since she wasn't used to participating much. Moreover, in this hall in her previous life, she had been criticized several times. Serbian silently told herself to snap out of it. She couldn't go on like this. Adarin noticed his daughter's discomfort and used his magic to shield her from everyone's gaze. Serbian felt reassured. As her father said, the vision would be blocked, so it would be okay. He suggested that starting with a walk in the garden might be a good beginning for the party, which Serbian thought was a considerable consolation, even though it wasn't outstanding. Serbian listened to her father saying it was a good start, but she still wanted to show everyone her mature side. At the dining table, Adarin pushed many sweets towards his daughter, telling her to eat as much as she liked. The queen also appeared at the party sitting next to the emperor. She complimented Serbian on looking very beautiful today. Ignoring the queen, Adarin allowed all the nobles to come and wish the princess a happy birthday in turn. The first to come was the master of the magic tower and Carmen's teacher. Upon meeting Trana, he immediately exclaimed that what Carmen said was right. Serbian wondered what Carmen had said about her. Without making her wait long, Trana complimented her beauty as rumored. The queen, feeling uneasy, wondered why he was paying attention to the princess already. Not to disappoint her, Trana asked the emperor if he knew that the mana scent on the princess was very strong. Adarin of course knew his daughter. This scent of mana would become outstanding and beneficial for the country. Although happy, he still reminded the tower master to be careful with his words. Serbian wondered if her father knew the truth that she could learn magic. Then why hadn't he let her learn it sooner? If she had learned magic, she wouldn't have been called a useless princess. Shavel, sitting nearby, incredulously said how could the princess's mana be emanating like that. At this moment, the emperor responded impatiently, "Didn't I ask for caution? The scent of mana can change at any time as one grows." Serbian realized that the scent of mana could change. Clearly, as she grew up, the scent of her mana had disappeared. That was why she could not learn magic in her previous life. While she worried about disappointing her father, she saw him reflecting on her mother's will, which expressed a wish for Serbian to become a free individual. Serbian also inadvertently noticed the queen's curiosity. She wanted to know what kind of abilities the princess had that made the tower master continuously praise her. The prince only arrived at the party now. He wanted to approach and greet his sister, but the queen was there. The event proceeded smoothly. High-ranking nobles came forward one by one to offer their congratulations. There were a few familiar faces with not-so-good memories for Serbian. However, according to the status window, they all bore goodwill towards the princess. Serbian thought, fortunately, perhaps her reputation wasn't bad. Seeing the princess distracted, Adarin asked if she was tired. He pushed a piece of cake towards her, encouraging her to eat to gain energy. Seeing the princess eating happily, Shavel reminded her to eat less for fear she might get too full. Serbian was frightened. This was the voice she often heard. Even though much had changed from the past, it still made her feel suffocated. The emperor, irritated, asked the queen what she was talking about. The queen put on a worried face and said she was just concerned for the princess. Adarin was determined to pursue the matter, saying it seemed the queen didn't know Serbian was good at eating. If the queen paid attention on regular days, she would know how well the princess could eat. Serbian saw the thoughts of the surrounding nobles who sympathized with her. The princess thought if it were her previous life, they would have quickly sided with the queen. So why were they opposing her now? Adarin, ignoring the queen, turned back to ask the princess if the food was very delicious. The princess answered the emperor. She was happy that things were different now. She was no longer alone. After eating her fill, Serbian felt sleepy, finding her childish body quite inconvenient. Suddenly, in her drowsiness, she read from the status at the party that there was a thief. Serbian wanted to chase the thief immediately, but it was already too late. She knew that theft in the royal palace was not a common occurrence. Moreover, the thief was dressed as a servant. Since it happened a long time ago, she had almost forgotten about it. In her previous life, the royal treasury had been destroyed. She couldn't remember what was stolen, but after that incident, Adarin had been attacked by factions. At the same time, the thief realized that today, with so many nobles around, it was inconvenient to act. He decided to postpone the treasury robbery until the next day. Serbian clearly remembered that after the treasury was robbed, The noble faction tightened control over the royal family. Knowing about the theft in the palace, they attacked Aderin decisively. She wasn't sure about the details, but she heard from her father that it was a very tough time. Serbian resolved that this time she must prevent the thief. On the second day of Serbian's birthday, only the children of the nobility attended, to allow the princess to establish relationships with other children, but the princess noticed something was off with her brother's demeanor. She then understood from his thoughts that he was upset because there were no friends her age at her birthday, and the attendees were all close to the count, something he could confirm their mother had arranged. Serbian realized this, but it didn't matter to her since her brother was with her. Now her brother was stronger than ever, very quick to grasp the situation. Although he didn't share her memories, she still thought he was wonderful. However, her brother's current concern for Serbian made her feel awkward. She couldn't leave to look for the thief. She wondered if she could spot the thief while gathered here. Carmen was also present at the party today, coming to greet the princess. Damien introduced him to his sister as a student of the Master of the Magic Tower. Serbian informed her brother that she had met Carmen previously when she had lost her way. Carmen looked at the princess adoringly, noting she had become cuter since they last met. Count Yongsik inappropriately came forward to congratulate the crown prince. Damien stiffly reminded him he was congratulating the wrong person. Youngsik naturally treated the princess as just a child. Hearing this, both Damien and Carmen darkened in anger, wanting to confront him. Damien was thoroughly enraged when the man demeaned the emperor and the princess in his presence. He ordered the guards to remove the man immediately. After the party, he planned to speak with his father about the insult. Serbian, however, was not concerned with this. Her mind was entirely on finding the thief. She had looked around for a long time but did not see him. Since he was disguised as a servant, she focused mostly on the status of the surrounding servants. Finally, after much effort, the princess located him. She quickly told Ellie she wanted to find a place to rest, pretending she was tired, but actually she was planning to pursue the thief. Serbian knew that he was targeting the palace's treasure, so she just needed to head there. She had a bad feeling, a strong premonition that something was about to happen. When she encountered the thief, he thought to take the princess hostage to escape through a secret passage. Serbian, aware of his thoughts, warned Ellie that he was acting strangely. The thief told himself to stay calm, believing he was alone and could easily capture the princess. Just as he was about to draw his sword toward the princess, the royal guards appeared. The thief was anxious, wondering how the guards knew. Clearly, he hadn't sensed any signs. Damien, hearing the commotion, also rushed over. He was anxious to see if the princess was hurt. The thief was caught, but somehow the situation was bigger than she thought. Back at the palace, the emperor hugged his children, anxiously asking if they were all right. He loudly demanded that the captain of the guard explain the situation. The guard stepped forward to detail what would be explained by the princess's escort. Adant stepped up, saying he was the one guarding the princess. While escorting her as usual, they came near the treasure. The thief had disguised himself as one of the royal guards. He noticed when several signals were sent, but the man did not respond, and above all, the princess had sensed something suspicious about him. He immediately attacked, and Adant stepped in to defend. Aderin picked up on the phrase about sensing the suspicion. He looked at the princess and asked how she knew. Serbian, making a face, told her father that his face looked suspicious. Serbian knew she couldn't tell the emperor that she could read others' thoughts. She inwardly groaned, realizing she couldn't give the real reason as it would surely make her father suspicious. Aderin patted his daughter's head, saying it was good she wasn't hurt. Serbian waved her hand, saying it was because her brother, the guards, and Ellie were there. The emperor allowed the princess to return to her own palace to rest after the scare. The princess thought that capturing the thief meant less trouble for her father, which was good, wasn't it? It was fortunate that no one was hurt and everything ended well. After the princess left, the emperor asked the captain of the guard if the thief had confessed. He thought to himself that the emperor was very angry, and he just had to find a way to talk. The captain of the guard reported that the thief was targeting the royal treasury. Aderin loudly said that it was indeed to kidnap the princess. He thought to himself, isn't Serbian the treasure of the palace? The captain of the guard, knowing there was a misunderstanding, emphasized again that the culprit confessed that their goal was the location of the treasury. What was Aderin angry about? Wanting to take his daughter to the treasury, Damien had to speak up, stating obviously the princess is the shining treasure of the empire, but the thief was trying to sneak into the treasury itself. He even brought many tools to steal. Fortunately, the princess discovered him. Aderin, furious, slammed the table, saying the wizard before did the same. How could so many villains get close to the princess? Damien and the two guards could only keep silent before the emperor.